The Sovereign International Treasury Monetary 1, date December 22nd, 2021, Resolution N0009, based on previous resolution N0001 from April 7th, 2020, Anti-Crisis Financial Measures, Resolution N02, date June 2nd, 2020, The One Way Out of the Global Financial Crisis, Resolution N04, dated February 23rd, 2021, Cancellation of historical assets in order to form a balanced new financial system, Resolution N05, dated July 16, 2021, Resolution N06, dated September 13, 2021, Resolution N05, dated July 16, 2021, Resolution N07, dated October 1, 2021. It is noted that the International Treasury Monetary 1, by virtue of its universal nature and legitimacy, is a unique and key organization for finding effective solutions in international economic issues to influence the development process in the world, and we reaffirm that the International Treasury Monetary 1 is well positioned to participate in various reform processes aimed at improving and strengthening the effective functioning of the international financial system and architecture, while recognizing that the International Treasury Monetary 1 and international financial institutions are endowed with complementary capabilities, as a result of which coordination of their actions is crucial. We state that the world is experiencing the most severe financial and economic crisis since the Great Depression. The growing crisis, which began with the beginning of the global pandemic inside the world's largest financial center, has spread to the entire world economy, causing serious social, political, and economic consequences. The International Treasury Monetary 1 is deeply concerned about its adverse effects on development. This crisis has a negative impact on all countries, especially developing countries, and threatens the livelihoods, well-being, and development opportunities of millions of people. This crisis not only revealed long-standing weaknesses and imbalances in the entire international financial system, but also gave impetus to increase efforts to reform and strengthen the international financial system and its structure. Our task is to ensure that actions and responses to the crisis are commensurate with its scale, depth, and severity, are provided with sufficient funding, are promptly implemented, and are properly coordinated at the international level. The International Treasury Monetary 1 once again confirms the goals set out in our Charter, including the goals to carry out international cooperation in solving international problems of economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian nature, and to be a center for coordinating the actions of nations in achieving these common goals. The principles of the Charter are particularly relevant in solving current problems. The International Treasury Monetary 1 has good opportunities to participate in various reform processes aimed at improving and strengthening the effective functioning of the international financial system and its structure. This resolution is part of our collective efforts under the guidance of Divine Providence to overcome the crisis. The resolution builds on what is already being done by the various parties involved and on various platforms, and contributes to this work, and is intended to support further actions, fills them with real content, and gives them a political impetus. This resolution also highlights the importance of the role of the International Treasury Monetary 1 in international economic issues, and the role in the restructuring of the architecture of the global financial system. Kindly note that developing countries that were not cause of the global economic and financial crisis are nevertheless seriously affected by it. The socio-economic progress achieved in recent years, in particular in the implementation of the internationally agreed development goals, is now under threat in developing countries, especially in the least developed countries. Difficult financial conditions put people in the least developed countries in the most difficult situation. People are malnourished, starve, go in the criminal world in order to survive. This process, which was partly supported by a period of high economic growth in many countries, should be consolidated and strengthened in the face of threats posed by the crisis. In our efforts, we call on everyone to proceed from the need to overcome the humanitarian cause of the crisis and increasing the already unacceptably large number of poor and vulnerable, especially women and children, who suffer and die from hunger, malnutrition, and diseases that can be prevented and treated, rising unemployment, reduced access to the education and medical services, and the inconsistency of the social protection system in many countries with modern requirements. Women also face a big problem of income instability and increased burden of caring for family members. These specific humanitarian costs have serious implications for development and, in this regard, for the humanitarian security of those affected by the crisis. Overcoming the crisis around the world on a fair basis requires the full participation of all countries in developing appropriate measures to respond to this crisis, and we once again responsibly declare to all countries to develop programs and provide the necessary financial assets to solve almost all problems, to form the basis for sustainable economic development. Despite the fact that financial and economic crisis has affected all countries, it is important to take into account the various consequences of the crisis and the problems and causes for different categories of developing countries. The crisis poses even a greater threat to the solution of the task of the international development, as well as the achievement of internationally agreed goals in the field of sustainable economic development. The International Treasury Monetary Fund is particularly concerned about the impact of the crisis on countries in special situations, including least developed countries, small island developing states, and landlocked developing countries, as well as African countries, and countries that have recently experienced conflicts, and countries that are experiencing conflicts today. The International Treasury Monetary Fund is equally concerned about the specific development challenges experienced by middle and low-income countries with vulnerable and poor populations. In all these countries, the crisis creates unique problems that hinder their efforts to achieve their national development goals. The collective measures proposed to respond to this crisis should take into account the specific needs of these various categories of developing countries, which include trade and market access, access to sufficient financial resources, and access to concessional financing, capacity building, strengthening support for sustainable development, financial and technical assistance, debt sustainability, trade facilitation measures, infrastructure development, peace and security, achieving sustainable economic development goals, and implementing our previous international commitments in the field of economic development. We remind peace, stability, and prosperity are inseparable. In today's globalized economy, all nations are much more closely connected than ever before. The global reach of this crisis requires prompt, decisive, and coordinated action to address its causes, mitigate its consequences, and strengthen or create the necessary mechanisms to avoid the recurrence of this similar crisis in the future. The current state of the global economy. This crisis is connected with the numerous interrelated global crises and challenges, such as growing problem of food insecurity, the lack of a strategy for energy security, and the volatility of energy prices and commodities, and climate change, and the absence to date of the results in framework of multilateral trade negotiations, and the loss of confidence in the international economic system. The global economic downturn has turned out to be much deeper than any initial estimates, and the recovery of the economy, according to forecasts, will be gradual and uneven in different countries. Although some countries are still experiencing positive, albeit much slower, economic growth rates, according to the latest estimate, the global gross product will continue to decline. The current crisis is fraught with disastrous consequences for people and development. An artificial pandemic formed to please the world elites in order to eliminate the remnants of democracy and establish a complete totalitarian regime on earth has given many consequences to which these self-proclaimed elites are forced to react today in the present time. Millions of people around the world are losing their jobs, incomes, savings, and homes. We estimate that 1.4 billion people, especially women and children, are already living in extreme poverty. According to forecasts, as a result of the crisis, the number of hungry and malnourished people around the world will increase to the historical mark of over 2 billion people. Consequences of the crisis. The crisis has led to the emergence of exacerbation of serious and widespread, but not the same consequences around the world. Since the beginning of the crisis, many states have reported negative consequences that vary by country, region, depending on the level of development and severity, among which can be distinguished rapid growth in unemployment, poverty and hunger, slowing growth, reduction in economic activity, negative impact on trade and balance of payments, reduction in foreign direct investment, significant and frequent fluctuations in exchange rates, growth of budget deficits, lower tax revenues, and narrowing room for maneuver in the fiscal sphere, a reduction in world trade, increasing instability and falling commodity prices, reduction in the amount of remittances coming to developing countries, a sharp reduction in income from tourism, the replacement of private capital inflows by its massive outflow, reduced access to credit and trade financing, reduced public confidence in financial institutions, reduced opportunities to maintain social protection system and provide other types of social services, for example in the field of health and education, an increase in infant and maternal mortality, the collapse of housing markets. Causes of the crisis. The motivating factors of the financial and economic crisis are complex and multifaceted. We recognize that many of the main causes of this crisis are related to the presence of weakness and imbalances in the entire financial system, which have played a role in the important functioning of the global economy. One of the fundamental factors in the current situation is the implementation of inconsistent and insufficiently coordinated macroeconomic policies and inappropriate structural reforms, which turned into unacceptable macroeconomic results on a global scale. The unfair distribution of financial assets based on institutional mechanisms, including fiat, unsecured money, free cross-border movement of the capital, and the system of floating exchange rates. The influence of individual countries on the development of the global financial system, on the size of their quotas and votes in the Bretton Woods institutions, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. The aggravation of these factors was caused by major omissions in the field of financial regulation, supervision, and control over the activities of the financial sector, and the lack of an adequate monitoring and early warning system. These regulatory omissions, which were compounded by an excessive emphasis on market self-regulation, a general lack of transparency and financial integrity, and responsible behavior led to the implementation of the excessively risky transactions, the establishment of exorbitantly high asset prices, irresponsible use of borrowed capital, and high levels of consumption, sparked by the possibility of easy loans and inflated asset prices. The state authorities in charge of the financial system and financial policy markets and financial institutions haven't been able to fully assess either the risks associated with the operation of the financial system, nor the magnitude of the growing factors of economic vulnerability and their cross-border connections. This is due to the conspiracy of the world financial elites, who for many years formed the system of training and education of economists and financiers in such a way that today there are only a few dozens of people who understand and analyze what is happening, who understand what countermeasures can be taken. Insufficient attention paid to the development of human potential on an equitable basis has been one of the reasons for the existing significant inequality between countries and people. Other systemic shortcomings have also played a role in the growing crisis, which indicates the need for more effective government intervention in order to ensure an appropriate combination of market freedom and public interests. Crisis response. We are all caught up in this crisis and must work together to find a way out, although each country bears primarily responsibility for its own socio-economic development. The International Treasury Monetary One will continue to work in a spirit of solidarity for a vigorous, coordinated, and comprehensive global response to the crisis in accordance with our capabilities and responsibilities. Developed and emerging market economies have taken the lead in restoring global economic growth. One of the immediate priorities was to stabilize financial markets and restore confidence in them and counteract falling demand and economic downturn. We have taken large-scale actions to maintain macroeconomic stability and restructure the architecture of the global financial system in order to strengthen and stabilize the global financial system. At the same time, decisive and urgent actions are needed to counter effects of the crisis on the most vulnerable groups of the population and to help restore high growth rates and lost positions on their way to achieving our internationally agreed sustainable economic development goals. Therefore, it is necessary that the adequate share of any additional resources, both short-term liquidity and long-term development financing, be provided to developing countries, especially the least developed countries. Although the crisis continues to have significant impact on the peoples of the world, we believe that the crisis provides an important opportunity for real change. In their further response, all countries should be focused on creating jobs, improving well-being, expanding access to health and education, correcting imbalances, developing and implementing directions for sustainable development from an environmental and social point of view, and taking gender perspectives into account comprehensively. Through their actions, all countries should also strengthen the foundation for a fair, inclusive, and sustainable global financial system based on the practice of renewed multilateralism. We are confident that we will come out of this crisis stronger and more energetic and more united. The need for prompt and decisive action. The International Treasury Monetary One undertakes to work in a spirit of solidarity, with a view to a coordinated and comprehensive global response to the crisis, and to take actions aimed in particular at restoring confidence and economic growth and ensuring full and productive employment and decent work for all, preserving the success achieved in the socio-economic field and in the development process, providing adequate financial support from the International Treasury Monetary One to developing countries in overcoming the humanitarian and social consequences of the crisis, in order to preserve and build on the hard-won successes achieved so far in the economic field and in the development process, including the current progress towards the implementation of the Sustainable Economic Development Goals, reducing the debt level of developing countries, searching for opportunities to provide sufficient resources to developing countries for economic development without putting forward unreasonable counter-conditions, restoring confidence in the financial sector and restoring lending, promoting and intensify open trade and investment and preventing protectionism, promoting inclusive, environmentally sound and sustainable economic recovery and providing ongoing support to developing countries in their efforts to achieve sustainable economic development, strengthening the role of the development system of the International Treasury Monetary One in terms of responding to the economic crisis and its consequences for development, reforming, restructuring the entire architecture of the global financial system and strengthening the global financial and economic system and its structure in an appropriate way in order to ensure readiness for the challenges of today, strengthening sound management practices at all levels, including at the level of international financial institutions and financial markets, overcoming the humanitarian and social consequences of the crisis, ensuring the effectiveness of incentive measures for everyone. In our actions to counter the immediate manifestations of the crisis, a number of responsive actions have already been taken at the international level. Recognizing these efforts at the same time, the International Treasury Monetary One calls for increased cooperation and coordination between countries in the field of the fiscal and economic measures. Supporting the development process is an important and integral part of addressing the global crisis, in particular by taking measures aimed at strengthening sustained economic growth, eradicating poverty, and ensuring sustainable development. The International Treasury Monetary One calls on countries, when implementing national incentive measures, to avoid protectionism in any form and possible adverse consequences for third countries, especially developing countries. The International Treasury Monetary One encourages countries that are able to do this to use capabilities of readiness of the International Treasury Monetary One to provide the necessary amount of gold collateral for fiscal stimulus, while ensuring long-term fiscal sustainability. We also call on individual countries to adopt the responsible measures to the specific circumstances and use the existing potential of the International Treasury Monetary One to mobilize financial resources. While a number of developed countries and emerging market economies have already implemented comprehensive stimulus programs, most of the developing countries of the world do not have enough space for maneuver in the fiscal sphere to implement counter-cyclical measures in order to combat the consequences of the crisis and accelerate economic recovery. In addition, many countries are experiencing a shortage of foreign currency. In order for developing countries to take appropriate measures to respond to the crisis, they need to turn to us to ensure both short-term liquidity and long-term financing for economic development. We appeal to explore our mechanisms to ensure that developing countries, especially the least developed among them, are provided with adequate gold and foreign exchange resources. We emphasize that the International Treasury Monetary One takes on the financial burden in connection with overcoming the crisis and its consequences, and is open to cooperation for all countries. The developing countries that are facing an acute and extreme shortage of reserves of foreign currency as a result of the effects of the crisis, which negatively affects the state of their balance of payments, the International Treasury Monetary One gives the right to use legal trade protection measures on the basis of gold and foreign exchange collateral, provided from the International Treasury Monetary One, to lift restrictions on the movement of capital, which will make it possible to make measures to develop agreements between borrowers and creditors to repay debts in order to help mitigate the adverse effects of the crisis and stabilize the macroeconomic environment. Countries should have certain opportunities to flexibly apply counter-cyclical measures, as well as to take individualized and targeted measures to respond to the crisis. The International Treasury Monetary One calls for simplifying credit conditions so that they are timely, individualized, and specific, and provide support to developing countries facing financial, economic, and development problems. In this regard, the International Treasury Monetary One calls as an encouraging step to optimize the lending system, including through the modernization of credit conditions and the creation of more flexible instruments, such as flexible credit lines. New and existing programs should not contain unreasonable credit conditions of procyclical nature. The International Treasury Monetary One responsibly declares its readiness to resolve the issue of the early provision of the vast majority of aid on flexible concessional terms at the initial stage, in order to significantly and in short time to provide assistance to developing countries that are facing a shortage of financial resources. The growing interdependence of national economies in a globalizing world and the emergence of rule-based regimes for conducting international economic relations means that the space for maneuver in international economic policy, that is, opportunities for domestic policy, especially in the field of trade, investment, and international development, are now often limited by international rules, obligations, and requirements of the global market. The International Treasury Monetary One draws great attention to the fact that for many developing countries that seek to develop their own response to the financial and economic crisis, these regimes, rules, obligations, and requirements create problems, slowing down the processes of economic regulation. We also draw attention to the fact that many developing countries are calling for opportunities to implement more flexible policies within these constraints as a mandatory part of overcoming the crisis and solving specific national problems, which in particular include the humanitarian and social consequences of the crisis, continued success in achieving economic development goals, effective use of credit and liquidity mechanisms, regulations of local financial markets, institutions, instruments and capital flows, and limited trade protection measures. Each government will have to independently work out a compromise between the benefits of adopting international rules and obligations and the restrictions associated with the refusal of freedom of maneuver in politics. In this regard, the International Treasury Monetary One, to have no analogues and experience of the past, provides financial assets, mostly irrevocable, to form the foundations of sustainable development, giving any country that has applied the opportunity to independently overcome the crisis. The International Treasury Monetary One recognizes the continuing importance of good and responsible public administration along with national responsibility for policies and strategies implemented. The International Treasury Monetary One declares its commitment to ensuring the efficiency and effectiveness of economic and financial institutions at all levels, which are key determinations of long-term economic growth and development. The International Treasury Monetary One also declares its commitment to accelerate our collective recovery from the crisis through increased transparency, the eradication of corruption, and the strengthening of public administration. This crisis manifests itself in different ways in different regions, sub-regions, and countries. This heterogeneity of its consequences further complicates our common task of eradicating poverty and reducing inequality and promoting human development. Considering the sensitivity of regional and sub-regional institutions to the specific needs of their subjects, the International Treasury Monetary One notes the value of regional and sub-regional cooperation efforts in addressing the challenges associated with the global economic crisis, and calls for expanding regional and sub-regional cooperation, including, for example, involving regional and sub-regional development banks to interact with the International Treasury Monetary One on the basis of agreements on the provision of security currencies and through other initiatives, as the contribution of the International Treasury Monetary One in multilateral response to the current crisis and to increase the resilience to possible future crises. The current crisis affects not only the economic and financial sectors. The International Treasury Monetary One recognizes the fact that the crisis has humanitarian and social consequences, and their settlement is inevitably associated with certain problems. Short-term responses should take into account long-term challenges, especially those related to poverty eradication, sustainable development, environmental protection, and clean and renewable energy sources, food security, traditional gender equality in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, health, education, and sustainable economic growth, including full and productive employment and decent work for all. Strengthening existing social protection networks, creating new networks where necessary, and ensuring the guaranteed nature of social spending are essential for advancing the cause of human development and resolving the humanitarian and social consequences of the crisis. The International Treasury Monetary One reaffirms our commitment to the timely achievement of internationally agreed goals of sustainable economic development for all countries. The International Treasury Monetary One recognizes that the current economic crisis may lead to additional resource requirements for humanitarian assistance in developing countries. The International Treasury Monetary One emphasizes the need to take measures designed to guarantee the availability of adequate resources for international cooperation in the provision of humanitarian assistance, and is ready to provide the necessary financial assets to humanitarian organizations that have proven their transparency in delivering aid to those in need. In the current crisis, migrant workers are the most vulnerable group. The growing unemployment among migrant workers and the decline in their earnings, especially in economic developed countries, have seriously affected the volume of remittances, which represent an important source of private financial resources for households in the countries of origin. In order to maximize the benefits of international migration while complying with the relevant national laws and applicable international instruments, everyone needs to counteract unfair and discriminatory treatment of migrant workers and the introduction of unjustified restrictions of the movement of human resources. The International Treasury Monetary One recognizes the important contributions that migrant workers make both in the countries of origin and in the receiving countries. Forms of voluntary funding of the International Treasury Monetary One can contribute to solving the global problems we face. We recommend decreasing the amount of financial resources based on source of the International Treasury Monetary One, and where possible, use new sources of voluntary and non-traditional financing to provide additional financial replace. Traditional sources of financing and which should be provided in accordance with the priorities of developing countries and shouldn't create an unjustified burden for them. The current crisis shouldn't serve as a reason for postponing the necessary global response to climate change and environmental degradation based on the principle of common but different responsibilities and available capabilities. The International Treasury Monetary One recognizes the fact that the settlement of the crisis opens up an opportunity to promote initiatives for the environmentally balanced development of the economy. In this regard, we recommend that those countries in a position to do so use national stimulus packages to promote sustainable economic development, sustain long-term growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all, and poverty eradication. It is important that global environment initiatives and proposals are comprehensive and aimed at addressing the challenges of sustainable economic development and environmental protection and the use of economic opportunities, including climate change mitigation and adaptation, financing and technology transfer to developing countries, and sustainable forest management. In this regard, the International Treasury Monetary One is ready to participate in the initiatives to form pools and financial assets, valid money for gratuitous financing of programs to respond to climate change and environmental degradation, which is strategically an important aspect of the informational foundations for future generations. The deepening crisis poses a threat of an increase in the debt of developing countries, and consequently, the threat of reaching an unacceptably high level. This increasing pressure limits the ability of these countries to take appropriate fiscal measures to mitigate the effects of the crisis and to engage in development financing. The International Treasury Monetary One once again confirms that it's ready to provide appropriate measures to mitigate the negative impact of the crisis on debt of developing countries and to prevent the new debt crisis. In this regard, we support the full use of the available opportunities for flexible application of the framework principles for assessing debt sustainability and advocate the complete elimination of the debts of developing countries. The International Treasury Monetary One recognizes that the increasing volume of liquid funds around the world plays a useful role in overcoming the current financial crisis. Therefore, we strongly support the rejection of fiat money, unsecured cryptocurrencies, and support the transition to real money, which is based on gold and foreign exchange security, taking into account the recommendations of the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision in the field of banking regulation Basel III. The International Treasury Monetary One also welcomes the appeals of countries related to the additional distribution of treasury bills of the International Treasury Monetary One in terms of helping to increase global liquidity in response to the acute shortage of financial resources caused by the crisis, and in terms of helping to prevent crises in the future. We recommend that countries study the experience and potential of other countries that have deepened cooperation with the International Treasury Monetary One. Due to the current crisis, some states have become more active in calling for the reform of the current global reserve system to overcome its shortcomings. The International Treasury Monetary One takes note of the calls of many states to further explore the feasibility and expediency of creating a more efficient reserve system, including the possible role of the International Treasury Monetary One within any system and additional roles that could be played by various regional mechanisms. The International Treasury Monetary One also takes into account the importance of finding consensus on the parameters of such a study and its conduct. The International Treasury Monetary One takes into account the existence of new and existing regional and sub-regional initiatives in the field of financial and economic cooperation aimed in particular at eliminating the lack of liquidity and overcoming short-term difficulties associated with the state of balance of payments of the countries participating in such cooperation. In our efforts to overcome the current crisis, we call on the full use of the potential of trade as an engine of sustained economic growth and development. In this regard, we reaffirm our commitment to the establishment of a universal, rules-based, open, non-discriminatory, and fair multilateral trading system. The International Treasury Monetary One reaffirms that the international trade is the engine of development and sustained economic growth. In this regard, we reiterate our call for the rapid expansion of market access, the development of trade flows, and the priority consideration of the needs of developing countries. The International Treasury Monetary One welcomes the commitments to provide duty-free and quota-free market access to the least developed countries, to translate into practice the principle of special and differential treatment for developing countries, to simultaneously eliminate all forms of export subsidies and export support measures with similar consequences, to significantly reduce domestic support measures that lead to trade imbalances. The reform of the global financial and economic system and its architecture. We remind everyone once again about the transition to a new format of work, about the restructuring of the architecture of the global financial system, about the transition exclusively to the formation of a new financial system based on the provision of treasury bills of the International Treasury Monetary One, by the authority of the owner and regulator of the global financial system, being the owner and manager of the World Account in the World Bank, account NO01 0001 4888877 C3 AM01, distributed among various banks in 172 countries around the world, being the owner and manager of the World Account in the World Bank, account NO01 1700 3516 222 777 888 999, distributed among various banks in 172 countries around the world. As the owner and manager of assets, including accounts under the names White Spiritual Boy, Spiritual Wonder Boy, Spiritual Wonder Brothers, Morning Star, King David, Prophet Muhammad, Demas and Saint Timothy, White Mongolia, White Vatican, White Eagle, Maria Sinukuan or Divine Crystal, Maria Divine Banahaw or Sunflower, Maria Cristina or Divine Magdalene, Maria Makiling or Divine Ester Egg, Falcon, Alpha Omega, and other accounts are located in different banks in 189 countries around the world. In order to prevent the global financial crisis, the global shortage of collateral in the future for a sustainable and durable development of the world, the International Treasury Monetary One emphasizes the urgent need for further reform of the management system of the Bretton Woods institutions, which have shown their inefficiency, lack of accountability, and hidden influence on politics in favor of the interests of countries whose ambitions are focused on world domination, promoting the ideas of a totalitarian regime under the guise of high ideas of democracy, which was especially manifested in the current global crisis. These reforms should reflect current realities and should improve the prospects and increase the participation of dynamically growing emerging market economies and developing countries, including the poorest countries. The International Treasury Monetary One calls for a new stage in the reform of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the preparation of an operational action plan for further reforms in the context of the crisis and the global pandemic, with the participation of all stakeholders in a transparent, consultative, and inclusive process. The International Treasury Monetary One calls for consultations open to all stakeholders on further reforms in order to enhance the ability of the World Bank and the International Treasury Monetary Fund to respond and adapt to changes. It is essential that the World Bank and the International Treasury Monetary One has the necessary technical capacity, credit facilities, and financial resources to support and complement the efforts of developing countries to meet their common development needs. In this regard, the International Treasury Monetary One once again recalls its readiness to provide the necessary financial assets for the transformation and further activities of the Bretton Woods institutions, and the return of trust and respect for these institutions. We warn you that without necessary reforms of the Bretton Woods institutions, our confidence will invariably fall. As the future architecture of the global financial and economic system, the Bretton Woods institutions will have no place. Their places will be taken by new institutions, the foundations and principles of which will be based on effective assistance to countries in achieving and strengthening sustainable economic development. The International Treasury Monetary One agrees that the heads of the senior management of international financial institutions, especially the Bretton Woods institutions, should be appointed on the basis of open, transparent, and merit-based procedures, with due attention to gender equality in accordance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the geographical and regional representation. The International Treasury Monetary One responsibly declares, by the will of divine providence, transmits new instructions to AI, artificial intelligence, which manages the electronic system of accounting for assets, accounts, international settlement in the global financial system, the mechanisms of reform of the global financial and economic system, and its design and architecture are being launched. We remind that in connection with the declaration of the as reform of the World Bank, the International Treasury Monetary Fund, and other affiliated institutions of the World Bank, relevant to the Bretton Woods Agreement and Jamaica Agreement International Treasury Monetary One, as the owner of the world's assets, has withdrawn the right to monitor, control, and management of global assets from the World Bank and affiliated structures. Resolution N04, dated February 23, 2021. Cancellation of historical assets in order to form a balanced new financial system. introduced a complete ban on the formation of any sort of monetization, the so-called high-yield programs, including PPP, based on the assets under our management, introduced a complete ban on formed up, to this point huge fiat assets, formed on the basis of our assets, some of which are bred for balance, part of which is used as a mirror of accounts, some of which are entered in the balance, and with the use of a multiplier form the basis of the fiat system, enabling trade operations in the bonds of the type of the top 25 bank medium-term notes. Medium-term notes introduced a complete ban on other unspecified fiat assets frozen and assets obtained illegally, which is one of the factors of the global financial and economic crisis. We remind that in order to carry out any kind of monetization on the basis of assets under our management, it is necessary to obtain the right permission for such transactions from the International Treasury Monetary One. We remind that any actions with the use of assets under our management for the purpose of monetization in the financial system are crime and lie on the corporate and personal responsibility of persons, officials, and bank officers who commit these crimes. We recommend taking into account the established fact of managing the current global financial system on our planet, and since the publication of this resolution, the International Treasury Monetary One will block accounts without notification, liquidate, reset fiat assets, block or cancel access to transactions that are factors of the global financial and economic crisis. The International Treasury Monetary One responsibly declares that the inclusion of a full monitoring mode of the global financial system on the part of A1 activates all protocols of the most severe monitoring and automatic blocking of all assets, programs, monetization of this kind. The International Treasury Monetary One is determined to cancel, liquidate all fiat assets in the global financial system by 2027, and this restructuring will affect every financial institution. No one will be forgotten, nothing will be forgotten. The International Treasury Monetary One receives threats from organizations of secret world governance, and we once again responsibly declare that all of those who are sure that they are on the top of the management pyramid will be convinced that they are at the bottom and will no longer be able to do anything, as Divine Providence works. We strongly recommend to not violate the zone of freedom of the Divine will and make decisions without violating the Divine laws. Anyone who doesn't hear this recommendation and warning will be convinced at the shortest possible time of the power of Divine Providence. This resolution represents an important milestone in ensuring the continuous and coordinated participation of all states in overcoming this crisis and its consequences for development. Today we have formulated a global consensus on measures to respond to this crisis, prioritize the required actions and clarify the role of the International Treasury Monetary One. The International Treasury Monetary One and international financial institutions are endowed with complementary capabilities, as a result of which coordination of action is crucial. Therefore, we recommend continuing to ensure and strengthen cooperation, coordination, coherence of actions and exchanges between the International Treasury Monetary One and international financial institutions. In this regard, we believe that the current resolution represents an important step to ensure the expansion of cooperation. We are doing this in the interest of all nations in order to achieve more inclusive, equitable, balanced, development-oriented, and sustainable economic development that helps to overcome poverty and inequality. Approved, drawn up, and executed. His Highness Alexander Nikolaevich Paramonov, the Chief Treasurer of the International Treasury Monetary One, the President and Chief Operating Officer of the White Spiritual Boy, RSP Global Corp Incorporated, UNNO 509-519. The Sovereign International Treasury Monetary One, date October 29, 2021. World Bank Group, the Committee of 300 President, H.E. David, R. Malpass. Demand. The International Treasury Monetary One, SITM1, is guided by previous resolutions and statements. We, as the owner and manager of the World Bank account at World Bank, account N0010001 4 AAA 777 C3AM01, distributed among various banks in 172 countries around the world. We, as the owner and manager of the World account at the World Bank, account N001 700 35 16 222 777 888 999, distributed among various banks in 172 countries around the world. We, as the owner and manager of assets, including accounts under the names White Spiritual Boy, Spiritual Wonder Boy, Spiritual Wonder Brothers, Morning Star, King David, Prophet Muhammad, Demas and Saint Timothy, White Mongolia, White Vatican, White Eagle, Marie Sinukuan or Divine Crystal, Marie Divine Banahaw or Sunflower, Marie Cristina or Divine Magdalene, Marie Makiling or Divine Ester Egg, Falcon, Alpha Omega, and other accounts located in different banks in 189 countries around the world. We remind you over the past period of more than 2 years, everyone who tried to challenge our legal right to the disposal of assets were convinced that all rights to the disposal and management of the assets move to us with observance of all norms of law and the laws of the world, and we are able to see the sacred basis of divine law and power of indisputable fact, witnessing miracles of Saint Divine Providence. Taking into account the transfer rights of accounting, distribution, and control of assets to esteemed organizations in accordance with international law, SITM1 notified esteemed organizations of the transfer of the rights of disposal and management, and notified esteemed organization of all decisions and resolutions adopted. Pay attention to a true, real history of the use of these assets, known to us by right of management and disposal of the assets taken. We, represented by the International Treasury Monetary One, conducted a thorough study with the support of the Priority of Science, the Holy See, the Situational and Analytic Centers. We have to come to the final, irrevocable decision of which SITM1 are informing you esteemed organization by this demand. We revoke all rights of accounting, disposal, and control over the world accounts from your esteemed organization and all organizations associated with the World Bank Group. We recall all assets that were previously transferred to your esteemed organization. We activate the blocking of all system access codes to accounting, distribution, and control that World Bank Group and related organizations had. In connection with the transfer of assets at our disposal and management, observing all the norms of international law, the assets entered in the balance of the International Treasury Monetary One. In this regard, strongly recommend starting the procedure of removal from the balance of these assets and all securities formed on the basis of these assets and gradually beginning the elimination of valid and fit financial resources received by your esteemed organization. There is no possibility to consider the preservation of formed securities, valid and fit financial assets, based on assets that have not been put in use and have not been sent to social projects up to this point. Likewise, consideration of proposal is impossible. From the moment of receipt of this notification, to make the necessary system notification in the global financial system within 48 hours, in order to notify all banking and interbank organization in a timely manner, we instruct your esteemed organization. In order to maintain the functioning and financing of the programs of the World Bank Group and related organizations, only one option is possible for the formation of a future financial system: activation of cooperation with the International Treasury Monetary One, with a view to obtaining programs and instructions for considering further financial activities in your esteemed organization. We remind that any actions using the above assets for the purpose of monetization in the financial system are a crime and are the personal and individual responsibility of the persons, officials, and bank officers who commit these crimes. We remind that sacred rights of the guardians of the above assets have been revoked, and any actions contrary to the resolution of the International Treasury Monetary One and all force, dated February 23, 2021, the cancellation of historical assets in order to form a new well-balanced financial system will have immediate, inescapable, sacred and obvious consequences for the guardians with manifestation in the material world. We remind that in order to prevent fraud and deception of bona fide subjects of law, it is prescribed to transfer the register of documents for entry into the liquidation memorandum for the purpose of accounting, analysis, and evaluation of the integrity of ex-guardians, ex-holders, and ex-managers of the right to manage historical assets of the global financial system. It is possible to cover with one notification and list all merits of people who have worked and are working in your esteemed organization. We want to express our great gratitude to World Bank Group for accounting, distribution, and control of assets over the past years, and special thanks for the undeniable contribution made in maintaining of the culture of the world and education of people based on the principles of justice, freedom, and peace to maintain human dignity. The education in the spirit of peace, in order to strengthen the spirit of tolerance, dialogue, cooperation, and solidarity among all people. The assistance of people's right to education, so that education is aimed at full development of human personality and sense of dignity, creating opportunities for all individuals to be useful participants in a free society, and promote mutual understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations and racial, ethnic, and religious groups, as well as to contribute to the activities of the United Nations and maintain peace and security, and promote the development of peace and human rights. Faithfully, His Highness Alexander Nikolaevich Paramonov, Chief Treasurer of the International Treasury Monetary One, President and Chief Operating Officer of White Spiritual Boy, RSB Global Corp Incorporated, UNNO 52-1730. His Highness Rizal Salman B., Chief Advisor of the International Treasury Monetary One, President, Chief Executive Officer of White Spiritual Boy, RSB Global Corp Incorporated. To World Bank Group, the Committee of 300, to the President, H.E. David R. Malpas, date October 29, 2021. Notification. White Spiritual Boy RSP Global Corp Incorporated is guided by previous resolutions and statements. We confirm the transfer to the International Treasury Monetary One of the rights of the owner and manager of the World account in the World Bank, account NO 0100 01 AAA 777 C3AM01, distributed among various banks in 172 countries around the world. We confirm the transfer to the International Treasury Monetary One of the rights of the owner and manager of the World account in the World Bank, account NO 01 1700 35 16 222 777 888 999, distributed among various banks in 172 countries around the world. We confirm the transfer to the International Treasury Monetary One of the rights of the owner and manager of assets, including accounts under the names White Spiritual Boy, Spiritual Wonder Boy, Spiritual Wonder Brothers, Morning Star, King David, Prophet Muhammad, Demas and Saint Timothy, White Mongolia, White Vatican, White Eagle, Maria Sinukuan or Divine Crystal, Maria Divine Banahaw or Sunflower, Maria Cristina or Divine Magdalene, Maria Makiling or Divine Ester Egg, Falcon, Alpha Omega, and other accounts located in different banks in 189 countries around the world. We remind that over past period of more than 2 years, everyone who tried to challenge our legal right to the disposal of assets were convinced that all rights to disposal and management of the assets and their historical basis with observance of all norms of law and laws of the material world, and were able to see the sacred basis of divine law as an indisputable fact, witnessing miracles of the same divine providence. Taking into account the transferred rights of accounting, distribution, and control of assets to your esteemed organization, in accordance with historical law, we notified you of the transfer of the rights of disposal and management to the International Treasury Monetary One, as well as notified you of all decisions taken. Paying attention to a true, real history of the use of these assets during a long period of history, known to us by right of guardian, main manager, and administrator of the assets, we, jointly with the International Treasury Monetary One, conducted a thorough study, with the support of the Priory of Sion, the Holy See, the Situational and Analytic Centers. We have collectively come to the final, irrevocable decision of which we are informing you by this notification. We confirm the revocation of all rights, accounting, disposal, and control of the world accounts from your respected structure and all organizations associated with you. We confirm the revocation of all assets, rights that were previously transferred to your respected organization. We confirm that activation of blocks of all system access codes to accounting, distribution, and control which your respected organization and related organization had at their disposal. In connection with the transfer of assets at disposal and management of the International Treasury Monetary One, observing all norms of international law, the assets entered in the balance of the International Treasury Monetary One. In this regard, we strongly recommend starting the procedure of removal from the balance of these assets and all securities formed on the basis of these assets, gradually beginning the elimination of the valid and fit financial resources received by your esteemed organization. We confirm that there is no possibility of considering the preservation of formed securities, valid and fit financial resources, on the basis of assets that have not been put in use and have not been sent to social projects up to this point. Likewise, consideration of proposals is impossible. We confirm that from the moment of receipt of this notification to make necessary system notifications in the global financial system within 48 hours, in order to notify all banking and interbank organization in a timely manner, we instruct your esteemed organization. We confirm that in order to maintain the functioning and financing of the programs of the World Bank and related organizations, only one option is possible for the formation of a future financial system: activation of cooperation with the International Treasury Monetary One with the view to obtaining programs and instructions for conducting further financial activities in your honorable operation. We remind that any action using the above assets of the purpose of monetization in the financial system are a crime, and the personal and individual responsibility of persons, officials, and bank officers who commit these crimes. We remind that sacred rights of the guardians of the above assets have been revoked, and any actions contrary to the resolution of the International Treasury Monetary One, No. 4, dated February 23, 2021, the cancellation of historical assets in order to form a new well-balanced financial system, will have immediate, inescapable, sacred and obvious consequences for always manifestation in the material world. We remind that in order to prevent fraud and deception of bona fide subjects of law, it is prescribed to transfer to the International Treasury Monetary One the register of documents for entry into the liquidation memorandum for the purpose of accounting, analysis, and evaluation of the integrity of ex-guardians, ex-holders, and ex-managers of the right to manage historical assets of the global financial system. It is possible to cover with one notification and list all merits of people who have worked and are working in your esteemed organization. We want to express our great gratitude to World Bank Group for accounting, distribution, and control of assets over the past years, and special thanks for the undeniable contribution made in maintaining of the culture of the world and education of people based on the principles of justice, freedom, and peace to maintain human dignity. The education in the spirit of peace, in order to strengthen the spirit of tolerance, dialogue, cooperation, and solidarity among all people. The assistance of people's right to education, so that education is aimed at full development of human personality and sense of dignity, creating opportunities for all individuals to be useful participants in a free society, and promote mutual understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations and racial, ethnic, and religious groups, as well as to contribute to the activities of the United Nations and maintain peace and security, and promote the development of peace and human rights. Faithfully, His Highness Rizal Salman B., Chief Advisor of President, Chief Executive Officer of White Spiritual Boy, RSP Global Corp Incorporated. His Highness Alexander Nikolaevich Paramonov, Chief Treasurer of the International Treasury Monetary One, President and Chief Operating Officer of White Spiritual Boy RSP Global Corp Incorporated, UNNO 52-1730. Om.